Chapter 1: The Man I Became After the Rifle. I trained Army snipers for 15 years. 312 students passed through my classroom. I remember every face the way other men remember birthdays, by a shape, posture, silence. You don't forget people who learned to breathe through pain under your instruction. You don't forget the ones who shook the first time they realized a trigger pull was a permanent decision. The rifle left my hands long before I stopped being a sniper. The injury came on a dry morning overseas, the kind of morning where sound travels too far and mistakes echo. An IED buried shallow, smarter than it looked. The blast didn't kill me. It didn't even cripple me the way the movies like to show. It just took enough away that command decided I was better used alive and upright than dead and heroic. Shrapnel in the hip. Nerve damage. A limp that never quite goes away. You can still teach. The colonel told me, like he was doing me a favor. He wasn't wrong. Teaching wasn't a downgrade. It was refinement. The battlefield is chaos. The classroom is control. I traded dust and blood for whiteboards and silence. And I learned something important. You can shape outcomes better before the shot than after it. That's what I gave my students. Not marksmanship, they already had that. I taught restraint, pattern avoidance, consequence mapping. I taught them that the cleanest operation is the one nobody notices happened. 312 snipers left my program without ever knowing if I liked them. That was by design. When I retired, there was no ceremony, no speech, just a handshake and a box with my name stenciled on it. I drove west until the air tasted like salt instead of cordite, and stopped in San Diego because it was quiet enough to disappear in. My house sits on a street where people wave but don't ask questions. Beige walls, trim lawn, nothing memorable. I like it that way. I wake up at 0500 every day without an alarm. Old habits don't die. They stand at attention. I stretch the hip until the pain settles into something manageable. Coffee black. Eggs, no seasoning. I eat standing up, eyes on the window, back to the wall. I still do that even at home. Some things don't turn off. Laurel used to hate that about me. We met before the injury, before the limp. Back when I still thought I could keep two lives separate, soldier and husband. She liked the uniform. She liked what it said about me to other people. She didn't like what it took from me in private. You're not here even when you're here, she used to say. She was right. She just never understood why. The divorce was quiet. Paperwork. Lawyers. A calm conversation that felt more violent than any argument. Laurel's family had connections. Law enforcement, city offices, favors stacked on favors. I didn't fight the custody arrangement because I knew when to retreat from a bad position. Every other weekend. Holidays alternating. Phone calls supervised when she felt like enforcing them. Rules, she said. For the child. Rules, I understood. Rules are systems. Systems fail. Carrie was 12 year. He started asking real questions. He has my eyes. That steady, evaluating look that makes adults uncomfortable. He doesn't speak much when he's thinking. I recognize it because I did the same thing at his age, listening more than talking, filing away patterns I didn't have words for yet. When he stays with me, we keep a routine. Pancakes on Saturdays. Beach runs early before the crowds. I taught him how to tie knots before I taught him how to throw a punch. He knows the difference between noise and information. He knows when to look away and when to pay attention. He trusts me. That trust is the most dangerous thing I own. One night, while I was cleaning the old rifle I never shoot anymore, Carrie sat at the table doing homework. He watched my hands more than his math book. You ever miss it? He asked. Miss what? The Army. I thought about it longer than he expected. He noticed. He always does. I miss clarity, I said finally. I don't miss the rest. He nodded like that made sense, even if it didn't yet. Laurel called later that night to confirm Thanksgiving plans. Her voice was tight, controlled, the way people sound when they're already bracing for conflict. Pickup is Wednesday afternoon, she said. He'll be with my parents. I said, okay, because arguing through the phone never changes outcomes. After I hung up, I sat at the table long after Carrie went to bed. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Silence is useful, but it can also be a warning. I've spent my life preparing for failures, equipment failures, intel failures, human failures. I learned early that the worst mistakes happen when you assume systems will protect what matters to you. That's the lie civilians live with. That if you follow the rules, someone will be there when things go wrong. I don't believe that. I believe preparation is the only mercy you get in advance. The rifle taught me that. The classroom confirmed it. Fatherhood made it non-negotiable. When I turned out the lights that night, I checked the locks like I always do. Old habits. Necessary habits. I stood in Carrie's doorway for a moment, watching him sleep, memorizing the rise and fall of his chest the way I used to memorize terrain. There are things a man can live without. Comfort, approval, sleep. There are things he can't. I didn't know yet what was coming. I didn't need to. You don't prepare for specifics. You prepare for inevitability. That's who I became after the rifle. And that is exactly where this chapter ends. Chapter 2. Thanksgiving is a battlefield. Carrie asked me 3 days before Thanksgiving. He didn't ask directly. He circled it the way cautious people do, the way pray test the air before stepping out. We were in the garage, the door half open, afternoon light slanting across the concrete. I was rethreading a frayed rope, slow and methodical. Carrie sat on overturned bucket, elbows on his knees, watching my hands. "Do I have to go?" he said. I didn't look up. "Go where?" "You know." His foot tapped once, then stopped when he realized I noticed. "Mom's." Her parents' place. I finished the knot before answering. Tightened it. Tested it. "Yes," I said. "It's her year." He swallowed. "I don't like it there." That got my attention. I turned and leaned back against the workbench. "You don't like the food?" He shook his head. "It's not that. Your cousins." Another shake. Smaller this time. I waited. Silence is a tool. Children fill it if you give them room. "Grandpa Charles watches me," Carrie said finally, like I did something wrong. I kept my voice level. "Watches how?" Carrie shrugged, but his shoulders were tight. Like I'm being graded. That was a familiar posture. I'd seen grown men stand like that before evaluations, before tribunals. "What does he say to you?" I asked. "Not much. Just ask questions. About you." I felt something shift behind my ribs, slow and heavy. "What kind of questions?" "If you still talk to army guys. If you still have guns. If you get mad a lot." "And what do you tell him?" "The truth," Carrie said. Then, after a pause, "I think." I nodded. "That's fine." It wasn't. But I didn't say that. Charles Schwartz had been a presence in my life long before the divorce. Police lieutenant. 30 years on the force. The kind of man whose handshake was firm and whose smile never reached his eyes. At family gatherings, conversations bent toward him without him asking. People listened when he cleared his throat. Power doesn't need to announce itself. It just waits to be acknowledged. Laurel called that night to go over logistics. Pickup time. What Carrie should pack. The weather forecast at her parents' place like it mattered. "You're early this year," I said. "It's important to my dad," she replied. "You know how he is." "I do." There was a pause. I could picture her kitchen, the immaculate counters, the phone tucked between shoulder and ear, her posture already leaning toward compliance. "He's just old-fashioned," she added too quickly. "Old-fashioned how?" "Wayne," she said, warning in her voice now. "Don't start." I didn't raise my voice. "I'm asking about my son. And I'm telling you he's fine," she said. "My family is not a threat." I let that sit. People tell the truth most clearly when they're defending it. "What did Carrie say to you?" I asked. "He said he didn't want to go," Laurel admitted. "But kids say that about everything." "Not everything." She exhaled sharply. "You're not there. You don't see." "I see enough," I said. The line went quiet. Then Laurel said, "Charles thinks you're putting ideas in his head." I smiled despite myself. "Charles thinks a lot of things." "You don't help," she snapped. "You're distant. You won't just blend." Blend. The word stuck. "Is there a problem?" I asked. "No," she said. "There's order." That was closer to the truth. After the call, I sat in the darkened living room and ran through scenarios the way I always do. Threat assessment without drama. No weapons in the house. No visible history of violence. No legal grounds to object. Custody agreement airtight. Instinct told me something was off. The law told me my instincts were irrelevant. I cooked dinner like normal. Chicken, rice, steamed vegetables. Carrie pushed his food around his plate. You mad? He asked. No, you're thinking. Yes. About Thanksgiving? Yes. He hesitated. If I don't want to go, can I stay? I met his eyes. I can't keep you from going. That's dumb, he said quietly. I didn't argue. It's the rules. He frowned. Rules don't always make sense. I felt a flicker of pride, quickly buried. No, I said. They don't. Wednesday came faster than it should have. Laurel arrived mid-afternoon, her car spotless, her expression carefully neutral. Charles wasn't with her, but his absence felt deliberate, like a reminder of jurisdiction. Carrie hugged me longer than usual. His grip was tight, fingers digging into my jacket. I'll call you, he said. You don't have to, Laurel cut in. We'll be busy. I looked at her. He'll call. She looked away first. As Carrie walked toward the car, Charles's words echoed in my head, questions about guns, about anger, about control. Red flags don't always wave. Sometimes they whisper. Wayne, Laurel said, hand on the car door. Don't make this harder. I stepped back, gave them space. That's what the law demands. Space, distance, trust in systems designed by people who never had to bleed for their children. Carrie turned once before getting in. He raised his hand. I raised mine back. A small gesture, a promise neither of us spoke aloud. The car pulled away. I stood there until it disappeared around the corner. The house felt different without him. Empty in a way silence couldn't fill. I told myself I had done the right thing. Followed the agreement. Chosen restraint. Trusted that rules would hold where instinct wanted to interfere. That's what a reasonable man does. That's what I told myself as I locked the door and stood alone in the quiet, knowing without evidence, without proof, that I had just left my son on a battlefield and hoped the enemy would respect the rules. Chapter 3, the video they wanted me to see. The package arrived Friday morning. No return address. Small padded envelope. My name typed, not handwritten. The mailman slid it through the slot like it was any other day, like it didn't weigh more than the rest of the mail combined. I let it sit on the hall table for a full hour. That wasn't hesitation. That was discipline. You don't rush toward unknowns. You let them exist. You observe what they make you feel. When I finally picked it up, I could tell by touch what was inside. A USB drive. Cheap plastic. Lightweight. The kind people buy in bulk because they don't expect to need them again. I locked the front door. Closed the blinds. Habit. Control. The house was quiet in the way it only gets when Carrie isn't there. No background noise. No movement. Just me and the envelope and the growing certainty that instinct had been right and the law had been wrong. I didn't call anyone. I didn't text Laurel. I didn't pray. I sat at the desk in the spare bedroom, the one I used as an office, and powered up the old laptop I kept offline. No Wi-Fi. No cloud. No accidents. The USB clicked when I inserted it. Small sound. Final. One video file. No name. No timestamp. I hit play. The camera was already rolling. At first, I didn't recognize the room. Hardwood floor. High ceiling. Too much space for a family home. Then I saw the edge of the dining table, the same one Laurel's mother polished obsessively, and I knew exactly where my son was. Carrie stood in the center of the room. Not sitting. Not tied. Standing. His hands were clenched at his sides, shoulders tight, jaw locked the way mine used to be before inspections. There was a red mark already blooming along his cheek. Say it again, a man's voice said. I counted voices automatically. 1, 2, 3. More overlapping. 11 in total before the clip ended. I counted faces too. Aunts, uncles, cousins, men and women who wore uniforms during the week and civility like armor on weekends. The first blow came from off camera. Carrie staggered but didn't fall. He tried to stay upright. Try to be strong. That hurt more than the hit. Say it, the voice repeated. Calm. Instructional. Carrie started. The second blow landed harder. He went down on one knee. Louder. I didn't pause the video. I didn't look away. I didn't blink. This wasn't something to be endured quickly. This was information. Another kick. A slap. A shove that sent him into the table leg. Someone laughed. Not nervous laughter. Familiar laughter. The kind people use when they're comfortable being ugly. Your dad's a coward, a woman said. I recognized Laurel's cousin by her voice alone. Say it. Carrie shook his head. His lip was split now. Blood on his chin, on the floor, staining wood that had hosted holiday dinners for decades. A hand grabbed his hair and yanked his head back. Say it. He coughed. My dad. The kick to his ribs cut the sentence in half. I noted technique without meaning to. Poor form. Excessive force. Group dynamics feeding escalation. No concern for injury thresholds. No exit strategy. Amateurs with authority. Laurel stepped into frame then. She was holding the phone. Steady hands. Framing centered. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shouting. She wasn't intervening. Just say it, Carrie, she said, like she was asking him to apologize for spilling milk. This ends when you cooperate. That was when I felt something cold settle behind my eyes. Not anger. Recognition. She had chosen a side long before this moment. Carrie looked at her. Really looked. I saw something change in him then. Something breaking that wouldn't ever go back together the same way. They just want honesty, Laurel continued. Go on. Another hit. From behind this time. He collapsed forward onto his hands. Say your father's weak, Charles Schwartz said. He stepped into view, calm as a man conducting a meeting. No raised voice. No visible emotion. His badge caught the light when he moved. Carrie, he shook his head again. Smaller now. Slower. Charles nodded once. The next 30 seconds were deliberate. Not chaotic. Not frenzied. Coordinated. Rotating hands. Someone held Carrie upright while another struck him. Someone else corrected his posture when he slumped too much. Training by abuse. By the time they stopped, Carrie could barely stand. His breathing was shallow. His eyes glassy but still focused, still fighting. Say it, Charles said softly. For the camera, Carrie swallowed. Blood ran down his neck. My dad, he whispered, voice cracking, is a coward. Laurel zoomed in. Louder. My dad, he said again, tears finally spilling, is a coward. The room went quiet. Satisfied quiet. Then Charles leaned closer to the camera. Come home, soldier boy, he said. We're waiting. The video ended. The screen went black. I sat there with my hands folded, eyes on my reflection in the dark monitor. I waited for something to happen inside me. Rage, grief, panic, something loud. Nothing came. My pulse was steady. My breathing controlled. My thoughts already moving. 11 people. Clear faces. Clear voices. A controlled environment. Evidence delivered intentionally. This wasn't a mistake. It was a message. They wanted me to see it whole. To understand the scope. To know who held power. They wanted fear. I closed the laptop carefully. Ejected the USB. Labeled it with a strip of tape and a pen. Date. Time received. Source unknown. Then I sat back and stared at the wall. This was not the moment for emotion. Emotion clouds judgment. Judgment decides outcomes. What I felt instead was clarity. The kind you get when the last illusion dies quietly and leaves nothing behind. And that is exactly where this chapter ends. Chapter 4. Why the law was never an option. I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table until morning, the USB drive in my pocket like a live round. When the sky lightened, I stood, put on a jacket, and drove. No radio. No calls. Just the road and the quiet certainty that time mattered now. Laurel's parents lived 42 minutes away without traffic. I made it in 36. I parked across the street, engine off, and watched the house. Curtains open. Lights on. A car in a driveway I didn't recognize. I noted everything without attaching emotion to it. Emotion wastes time. I rang the bell. Laurel opened the door with surprise that curdled into irritation when she saw my face. You can't just... I'm here for my son, I said. She stepped into the doorway, blocking me with her body. This isn't your day. Move, I said. Charles appeared behind her, already composed, already ready. He didn't look like a man who had done anything wrong. He looked like a man who expected compliance. You should leave, he said. This is a family matter. I met his eyes. You forfeited that word. Laurel turned on me. Wayne, you're overreacting. He fell. Kids get hurt. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I took out my phone and hit record. Held it up where everyone could see. I'm here to retrieve my son, I said calmly. I am recording this interaction. If you interfere, I will document it. Charles's jaw tightened. He weighed options. He was good at that, but he wasn't used to being recorded without control. Carrie appeared at the top of the stairs. He was moving slowly, carefully. His face was a map of bruises, some fresh, some already darkening. When he saw me, something in him gave way, not loudly, not dramatically. His shoulders sagged. Relief, heavy and unguarded. "I'm going home," I said to him. Laurel started to protest. Charles lifted a hand, stopping her. "Let him go," he said. For now. For now." I didn't respond. I walked past them, up the stairs, and put my jacket around Carrie's shoulders. He leaned into me, without thinking, muscle memory overriding fear. "Do you need help walking?" I asked. He shook his head. "I can." We left without another word. In the car, Carrie stared out the window. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. That worried me more than anything else. "You're safe," I said. "I've got you." He nodded once. At home, I moved with precision. Shower first, warm water to relax muscle tension, to wash away the house, the smells, the memory. Clean clothes. Soft food. Hydration. I sat him on the couch and examined him the way I'd examined soldiers after bad landings. "Tell me where it hurts," I said. "Everywhere," he answered honestly. We went to the ER under my name. Private intake. I requested a full exam and imaging. When the nurse asked what happened, I said, "Assault." Clear. Unambiguous. Carrie flinched at the word. "I'm here," I told him quietly. The doctor documented everything. Contusions. Hairline fracture in a rib. Internal bruising. The nurse took photographs with timestamps. I asked for copies. I asked for reports. I asked for everything. "Are you filing a police report?" the doctor asked. "No," I said. She looked surprised. "He's a minor." "I know. It would help his case. It would end it," I said. She didn't argue. Professionals recognize certainty when they see it. Back home, I set Carrie up in the spare room, quiet, dim, familiar. I sat on the floor beside the bed until he fell asleep, his breathing finally deepening, his body letting go inch by inch. Then I stood and thought. I laid everything out the way I'd been trained. Options, risks, likely outcomes. Call the police? Charles Schwartz was a lieutenant with 3 decades on the force. His friends would take the report. His allies would frame the narrative. The video would be investigated. The family would close ranks. Carrie would be interviewed again and again, forced to relive it until his words blurred and doubt crept in. Family court? Slow. Public. Leaky. Judges who defer to local authority. Laurel's family had resources, time, and influence. They would paint me as unstable. A former sniper with anger issues. A man who taught violence for a living. Media? Sensational. Uncontrollable. Carrie's face on screens. His pain turned into commentary. No, every path through the system led back to the same place. Exposure without protection. Justice delayed until it dissolved in a process. The law is a machine. It requires clean inputs and patience. What happened to my son was neither. The more I considered it, the clearer it became. This wasn't about winning a case. It was about preventing further damage. Carrie needed sleep, predictability, silence. He needed to know that when the world broke, his father didn't outsource protection to strangers in uniforms. I realized then what I'd been avoiding since the day I left the battlefield. I had told myself I was done making hard decisions for other people, that I'd earned the right to be ordinary, to trust systems, to follow rules. That was a lie I'd accepted because it was comfortable. War doesn't end when you leave it. It waits. It tests your assumptions. It shows you, eventually, what you're still willing to do. I sat at the kitchen table again, reports spread out, photographs face down. The USB drive beside them, silent and complete. No rage, no speeches, no justification required. Just a simple truth finally acknowledged. The law had never been an option. And that is exactly where this chapter ends. Chapter 5, the question I asked my class. The classroom was already quiet when I walked in. 28 men sat in 3 rows, back straight, eyes forward. No phones, no whispers, no wasted motion. They'd learned early that silence wasn't a courtesy, it was a baseline. The kind of silence that meant everyone was ready and no one needed to prove it. This was the advanced course, the last stop before deployment for some, the final refinement for others. These weren't recruits. They were operators, men who had already been tested and survived it. I set my bag on the desk and looked at them one by one. Not faces, postures, breathing, the way hands rested on notebooks like they were tools, not decorations. "Morning," I said. "Morning, sir." They answered in one voice, not loud. I nodded and turned on the projector. Usually, this is where I'd start with a scenario. A map, a problem with edges they could explore without falling into it. Today, I skipped all of that. No introduction, no warm-up. I plugged in the USB. The screen lit up. A few of them shifted, subtle adjustments, instinctive. Something about the framing put them on edge before anything even happened. They felt it before they saw it. Good instincts. Sharpened. I hit play. The room stayed silent. They watched the video the same way I had, without interruption, without commentary. Professionals know when to let something speak for itself. I stood at the side of the room, arms crossed, eyes not on the screen but on them, watching reactions measured in millimeters. A tightening jaw, a fist curling and then relaxing, a breath held too long, then released carefully. When Carrie appeared on the screen, there was a collective shift. Recognition, not of him, but of what he represented. Vulnerability. Innocence placed deliberately in harm's way. By the time the first blow landed, no one looked away. When Laurel stepped in a frame, filming, I heard a chair creak. Someone leaned forward, elbows on knees now, posture changing from student to witness. When Charles spoke, calm, authoritative, the room hardened. Authority misused always registers. It's a specific frequency. I didn't move. I didn't react. The video ended. The screen went black. No one spoke. I waited. Silence stretches differently among people trained to operate within it. This one was taut, humming with unasked questions. Finally, one of them cleared his throat, not asking permission, just grounding himself. "Sir," he said carefully, "what are we looking at?" "A problem," I answered. Another voice, quieter. "Is it your son?" I met his eyes. Yes. No gasps. No murmurs. Respect doesn't announce itself. It just adjusts behavior. I walked to the front of the room and shut off the projector. The sudden absence of light felt heavier than its presence. "There are two paths available after something like that," I said. "One is legal. One is just." No one took notes. They didn't need to. "The legal path is slow," I continued. "Public. Leaky. It requires faith in systems that function best when power is evenly distributed. A few heads tilted. Not disagreement. Analysis. The just path is faster," I said. "Private. Controlled. It requires accepting consequences before you know what they are." I paused, letting that land. "In your careers," I said, "you'll be asked to choose between them. Sometimes explicitly. Sometimes without being told that a choice is being made at all." One of the men raised a hand halfway, then lowered it when I nodded. "Sir," he said, "what's the objective?" I considered the question. "Protection. Not retaliation." No, another voice. "Deterrence." "Possibly," I said. "But that's a secondary effect." They absorbed that. These men understood layered outcomes. I rested my hands on the desk. "The law is a framework," I said. "Justice is an outcome. They overlap sometimes. Often they don't." A man in the back spoke, his tone neutral. "What happens when they don't, sir?" I looked at him. Really looked. He didn't flinch. "Then someone decides which one matters more," I said. The room stayed still. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down, the way it does right before an irreversible step. This wasn't a lecture anymore. It was a line. I took a breath. Controlled. Measured. "This is not an order," I said. "This is not an assignment. This is not something you discuss outside this room." I let my gaze travel across all 28 of them. "This is a question." I paused. "Who wants extra credit?" For a fraction of a second, just a fraction, nothing happened. Then, as if moved by the same thought at the same time, all 28 hands went up. No hesitation. No glances to see who else was moving. No questions about parameters or rewards. Just decision. I felt something settle in my chest. Not relief. Not pride. Responsibility. I nodded once. Lower your hands. They did. We'll talk after class, I said. Individually. Someone swallowed. Someone else straightened further. I dismissed them early. No one lingered. No one rushed me. They filed out with the same discipline they'd entered, leaving the room empty except for me and the echo of what I'd just done. I sat down in the chair behind the desk for the first time that morning. I understood then, fully, without illusion, the weight of the path I'd stepped onto. Not because of what might happen to others, but because of what it required of me. I had asked a question that couldn't be taken back, and every hand had answered. And that is exactly where this chapter ends. Chapter 6, 11 names, no mistakes. I didn't call a briefing. Briefings imply discussion, debate, clarification. This wasn't that. I scheduled the meetings one by one, 15 minutes each, staggered so no one crossed paths. No names on the calendar, just times. They showed up exactly when they were told to. That told me everything I needed to know. The room was small. No windows. Table, 2 chairs. A whiteboard I didn't use. The door stayed closed. The first man sat down and waited. Hands on his thighs. Eyes level. Calm. I slid a manila envelope across the table. Don't open it yet, I said. He didn't. I looked at him for a moment, longer than necessary. Testing stillness. Testing restraint. There are 11 people, I said. Each of you will receive one. He nodded once. These are not suspects, I continued. They're confirmed participants. Faces, voices, timestamps. Independent corroboration. No reaction. Good. I tapped the envelope. Everything you need is inside. Nothing you don't. Objective, he asked. I met his eyes. Removal from capability. He understood the phrasing. So did the others. I slid a single page across the table. Typed. Clean. No letterhead. These are the rules, I said. They are not suggestions. I watched his eyes move as he read. No deaths. Hospitalization minimum. No communication. No patterns. No evidence. Deadline. Monday. He finished and looked up. Any flexibility? No, I said. Any oversight? No, he nodded again. Acceptance without enthusiasm. Without hunger. Questions? I asked. He thought for a moment. None. Good, I said. You're dismissed. He stood, tucked the envelope under his arm without opening it, and left. That pattern repeated itself 27 more times. Different faces. Same posture. Same silence. Some asked about legal exposure. Some asked about collateral risk. Some asked nothing at all. None of them questioned the premise. One man paused longer than the others, fingers resting on the edge of the envelope. Sir, he said carefully, why 11? I didn't hesitate. Because there were 11. He absorbed that, then nodded. Understood. Another asked, why no communication? Because coordination creates fingerprints, I said. A third, hospitalization minimum. Consequences that cannot be ignored, I replied. Without permanence. They didn't push. They didn't bargain. By the time the last man left the room, the table was empty and my throat was dry. Not from nerves, from the weight of finality. I had prepared the packets days earlier. That was the part that mattered most to me. Each envelope was identical on the outside. Inside, they were precise. Names, photos, schedules, known habits, public-facing routines only. Nothing speculative. Nothing that required improvisation under pressure. I had stripped each target down to observable facts. No gossip, no assumptions. If you act on assumptions, you deserve what happens next. I had spent nights assembling them. The house quiet, Carrie asleep down the hall. I worked with the patience I used to reserve for long-range problems. One variable at a time. Cross-checking. Verifying. This wasn't revenge. Revenge is sloppy. Emotional. This was containment. When the last meeting ended, I locked the room and sat alone for a long time. The hum of the building's HVAC system filled the space. I let it. I thought about supervision, oversight, the instinct to manage outcomes. I rejected it. Supervision creates dependency. Dependency creates failure. These men have been trained to operate independently, to make decisions without guidance, to own consequences without witnesses. If I stepped in now, I would contaminate the operation. Authority isn't about presence. It's about trust and preparation. I sent a single message to the class channel. You have what you need. No updates required. No confirmations expected. Nothing else. No responses came back. That was correct. Friday afternoon bled into evening. I left the building without ceremony. No one followed me. No one looked back. At home, I cooked dinner and ate it standing up. Checked on Carrie. He was sleeping better now, color slowly returning. He stirred when I adjusted the blanket. "You okay?" he murmured. "I'm here," I said. That was all he needed. Later, I stood in the garage and looked at the wall where old plaques hung, dusty and irrelevant. Awards given for outcomes no one remembered. They didn't matter anymore. What mattered was restraint. 11 operations would unfold without my eyes on them. Different methods, different locations, different hands. No shared rhythm, no shared language. That wasn't chaos. That was design. I didn't track progress. I didn't set alerts. I didn't check news feeds. Anticipation is a form of attachment. Attachment compromises judgment. Monday was the deadline because time compresses risk, because uncertainty frays discipline, because a line has to exist somewhere. By Sunday night, whatever would happen would already be in motion. I sat at the kitchen table one last time and reviewed the rules again, not because I needed to, but because repetition reinforces intent. No deaths. Hospitalization minimum. No communication. No patterns. No evidence. Deadline. Monday. I accepted the weight of those words the way I'd accepted others before them, in other rooms, under different flags. I had authorized something I could not control. That was the point. And that is exactly where this chapter ends. Chapter 7, 72 Hours of Silence. The weekend began without ceremony. Friday ended the way most days did, keys on the hook, shoes aligned, lights off in rooms not being used. I didn't mark the hour. I didn't check anything. Time had already been given its boundaries. My role now was absence. Saturday morning arrived on schedule. I woke at 0500 and made coffee. Black. Carrie slept longer these days, his body catching up on rest it had been denied. I moved quietly, the way you do around something fragile that's finally healing. I cooked oatmeal and left it covered on the stove. Ate my eggs standing up. The house held its breath with me. When Carrie came into the kitchen, he moved more easily than he had the day before. Still stiff, but less guarded. "Morning," he said. "Morning." He looked at the pot. Oatmeal. Bananas on the counter. He nodded and sat. No flinch when he lowered himself into the chair. That mattered. We didn't talk about anything important. That mattered more. After breakfast, I drove him to the beach early, before the families and joggers filled the sand. He walked barefoot, toes digging in, letting the cold water wash over his ankles. He stood straighter with each wave. I watched from distance. Not hovering. Present. "Can we come here again tomorrow?" he asked. Yes. That was all he needed. Back home, I taught an afternoon block remotely. No mention of current events. No deviation from his syllabus. My voice stayed even. The class stayed focused. If any of them were already moving, they didn't show it. I didn't expect them to. That night, I cooked pasta. Carrie asked for seconds. Another small improvement. Another data point. I tucked him in and sat on the edge of the bed while he drifted. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need reassurance spoken aloud. He trusted silence now. I returned to the kitchen and cleaned everything twice. Not because it was dirty, because repetition keeps the mind from wandering. I didn't turn on the television. Sunday morning, the first headline appeared. I saw it incidentally while checking the weather on my phone. Local man hospitalized after parking garage, incident no name. No photo, just a location 2 states away. I read it once. Closed the tab. Outcomes, not methods. Carrie slept in. When he woke, he asked if we could make pancakes. We did. He flipped one himself, careful, focused. The batter landed crooked, but held. He smiled at it like it was proof of something. Later, he asked if he could invite a friend over next weekend. Yes, I said. He looked at me then, searching for something. Finding it, apparently, because he nodded and went back to his game. That afternoon, another alert surfaced. OFF duty officer in critical condition following altercation, different state. Different circumstances. No connection drawn. I didn't read the article. I didn't need to. I took Carrie for a drive instead. No destination. Just motion. He talked about school. about a science project he was behind on, about a teacher who talked too fast. Normal complaints. Normal problems. Normal was returning. Sunday evening, the news cycle thickened. A mugging gone wrong in a third state. A fall down a flight of stairs reported as an accident. A home invasion with no suspects and no stolen property. The anchors sounded confused. The analysts speculated and contradicted each other. Patterns require proximity. This had none. I ate dinner alone that night. Carrie had gone to bed early, tired in a way that meant healing. I sat at the table and wrote nothing down. No lists. No tallies. Tracking outcomes doesn't require paper. By midnight, I knew 7. Not from counting articles. From experience. From a way the noise level changes when something is almost finished. I slept for 4 hours. Woke once. Went back to sleep without dreams. Monday came quietly. I made coffee. I stretched the hip until it loosened. Carrie woke on his own and padded into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. I slept all night, he said, surprised. I know. He grinned. Wide. Unburdened. While he ate, I checked the news again. Not obsessively. Just enough. A fourth state had joined the list overnight. Another hospitalization. Another ongoing investigation. 11. No names connected. No timelines aligned. No shared description. I closed the browser. Carrie shouldered his backpack and paused at the door. You coming to pick me up today? Yes. He hesitated, then stepped forward and hugged me. Not tight. Not desperate. Just solid. I feel better, he said into my chest. I rested my hand on the back of his head. I know. After he left, the house returned to its quiet. I didn't call anyone. I didn't check messages. None had come in. That was correct. I went to work. Taught my classes. Asked questions unrelated to anything that mattered outside the room. Listened to answers that were sharp and controlled and exactly what I expected. No one looked at me differently. At noon, a colleague mentioned the news in passing. Strange weekend, he said. A lot of unrelated violence. I nodded. Happens. He shrugged and changed the subject. By the time I drove home, the cycle was already moving on. Something else had caught the public's attention. Something loud. Something easy. Carrie was waiting on the porch when I pulled up. He ran down the steps and got into the car without looking over his shoulder. That was the last indicator I needed. 72 hours had passed. Everything that needed to happen had already happened. And that is exactly where this chapter ends. Chapter 8, Monday morning. Monday arrived like any other day. That was the point. I woke at 0500, stretched until the hips stopped complaining, and made coffee. Black. The house was quiet but not empty in the way it had been a week ago. Carrie slept down the hall, breathing steady, door half open the way he liked it now. I didn't check the news immediately. Routine first. Ordered before confirmation. By the time I sat at the kitchen table, coffee cooling in my hand, I already knew. Not the details. Not the how. Just the outcome. You learn to feel when a sequence has closed. I opened the browser anyway. Different cities. Different headlines. Different excuses. Hospitalized. Critical but stable. Under observation. Suspect unknown. Incident under review. 11 variations of the same conclusion. No deaths. No shared narrative. No connective tissue anyone could grab onto. I closed the laptop and sat there for a moment longer than necessary, not because I was savoring anything, but because pauses matter. They mark transitions. They let you step cleanly from one state into another. Carrie wandered into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. Is it a school day? He asked. Yes. He nodded, unbothered, and poured cereal. Milk sloshed too high. He didn't notice. He was already thinking about something else, a quiz, a game, a normal concern appropriate for a 12-year-old. That mattered more than anything else that had happened over the weekend. You're quiet, he said. So are you. He shrugged. I feel normal. I looked at him. Really looked. The bruises were fading. Yellow now. Green at the edges. His posture was different too. Less inward. Less guarded. That's good, I said. It was enough. I dropped him off at school and watched him walk through the gate without turning back. No scanning the parking lot. No hesitation. He disappeared into the flow of other kids like he belonged there again. I drove to work. The parking lot was full. Monday traffic. Monday energy. People carrying coffee, and complaints and nothing heavier than inconvenience. Inside the building, the hum was different. Low-level tension. Phones ringing more than usual. Doors closing a little too deliberately. Someone had turned on a television in the break room. A reporter stood outside a hospital entrance. Microphone clutched like a lifeline. "Authorities are still investigating," she said. At this time, there is no indication the incidents are related. No indication. Good phrasing. I passed without stopping. My classroom was ready. Chairs aligned. Board clean. Projector off. Exactly how I'd left it Friday. The students filtered in one by one. Same 28. Same discipline. Same silence. If they were tired, they hid it well. If they were injured, it didn't show. If they were carrying anything heavier than before, it stayed behind their eyes. "Morning," I said. "Morning, sir," they replied. I began the lesson on time. No preamble. No acknowledgement. No shift in tone. We discussed scenario planning, failure points in urban environments. They offered answers precise and unemotional. Good answers. Focused answers. No one looked at me longer than necessary. No one tried to catch my eye. Halfway through, one of them spoke up, voice neutral. "Sir, in situations where information is incomplete, how do you determine when an objective has been met?" I didn't pause. "When further action increases risk without improving outcome." He nodded and wrote it down. That was as close as anyone came to referencing anything outside the room. During the break, I stood by the window and looked out at the parking lot. A police cruiser rolled past slowly, lights off. Routine patrol. No reason to stop here. Two instructors whispered near the coffee machine. "Internal affairs is a mess," one said. "Over what?" the other asked. "Couple of officers hospitalized. Different jurisdictions. Brass is scrambling." "Related? Officially?" "No." They noticed me then and stopped talking. I nodded politely and went back to my classroom. The second half of the session ended early. Not because it needed to, but because there was nothing left to add. They gathered their things with the same care they always did. One lingered for a moment at the door. "Sir," he said. "Yes." He seemed to consider his words, then chose not to use them. "Have a good week." "You too," I replied. He left. I stayed behind and erased the board, even though it was already clean. The operation ended without ceremony because ceremonies create records. Records create questions. By lunch, the building buzzed with rumors. Speculation moved faster than facts always do. Someone mentioned a task force. Someone else mentioned federal interest. None of it mattered. By mid-afternoon, the story began to fracture. Too many angles. Too many talking heads. Too little substance. Attention drifted. I checked my phone once. No messages. That was correct. At home, Carrie was already there, sprawled on the couch with a textbook open but unread. He looked up when I came in. "Can we order pizza?" he asked. "Yes." "Pepperoni. Extra cheese." We ate on the couch and watched a movie we'd both seen before. He laughed in the right places. He didn't flinch at sudden noises. Halfway through, the news cut in with a breaking update. Another hospitalization. No suspects. No public threat. Carrie glanced at the screen, then back to the movie. "Can we skip this?" he asked. "Yes." I turned it off. Later, after he went to bed, I stood in the hallway and listened to him breathe. Steady. Unafraid. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. No alcohol. I didn't need it. I thought about the classroom, about the envelopes, about the rules that had been followed precisely because they were clear. No deaths. Hospitalization minimum. No communication. No patterns. No evidence. Monday. Everything had resolved inside those boundaries. I felt no relief. Relief implies tension has been released. This was something else. Completion. Like finishing a checklist you never wanted to write, but needed anyway. I washed the glass and set it upside down on the rack. Tomorrow would look like today. The day after that, too. Schedules. Homework. Lessons. Life resuming because it had been protected from interruption. That was enough. The operation was over. And that is exactly where this chapter ends. Chapter 9. The phone call. The phone rang at precisely 0832. I was in the kitchen, measuring coffee grounds into the grinder. The aroma filled the room, grounding me in the mundane. I didn't need to see the caller ID. I already knew. I let it ring twice, 3 times, then lifted it deliberately. Wayne Dodson. Wayne. The voice roared through the receiver like it could punch glass. Charles Schwartz. The kind of roar that demanded obedience, that usually bent people backward, that often ended conversations before they began. "Good morning, Charles," I said evenly, letting the calm hang in the air like smoke. "You have no idea what you've done." His tone cracked somewhere between fury and disbelief. "I think I do," I replied. "Carrie, my granddaughter, my family. Do you have any idea?" I held up a hand even though he couldn't see it. "I know exactly what happened. I have a video. I have the medical reports." There was a pause. You can't know." He stumbled over words. Normally precise. Normally commanding. I could hear the gears trying to catch up to reality. "Yes," I said, sipping coffee. "All 11 participants documented. Contusions, bruises, hairline fracture. Dates, times, photographs, corroborated evidence. Full chain of custody." His breathing hitched. You've gone mad." "No," I said. "I've gone precise. Controlled. Disciplined." "You going to what? Publish it? Call the media?" His voice rose again, but there was fear mixed with anger now. It betrayed him. "I won't if this ends now," I said. "I will file emergency custody papers this morning. If you interfere, if Laurel interferes, if anyone tries to block the process, I will expose everything." He swallowed. I could hear it over the line. The sharp intakes between rapid breaths. You can't, I can, and I will. I prepared for this. No loose ends. No leaks. No errors. All evidence verifiable. If you attempt retaliation, it will be documented. Public. Irrefutable. Charles was pacing. I could hear it in the shifting steps, the creak of polished floors. "You think you can control this?" "I don't need to control it," I said. "I've already acted. The outcomes are irreversible. You know that. I don't have to explain methods. Only consequences." His words were jagged, shattered. "Do you realize who you're talking to?" "Yes," I said, taking another sip of coffee. "I also realize who you aren't talking to." A long silence. Breathing. Hesitation. Then he spoke, quieter now, almost a whisper. What do you want?" "Compliance," I said. "Immediate, total. No interference with my son. No attempts to contact him. No misrepresentation. No public statements. Or else," he tried to growl again, but it lacked its previous conviction. "Yes," I confirmed. "Or else. And Charles, understand this. This weekend was mercy. Next time won't be." The words landed like a hammer. I could hear him stop moving. His posture changed even over a phone line. You'd really, I've already acted," I said. "I don't need to threaten hypotheticals. This isn't negotiation. This isn't posturing. This is a warning and a promise. One that you are already bound to respect." Silence again. Then, finally, a voice that was broken, controlled by neither pride nor fury, just raw recognition. I understand." "You do," I said. "Good. That's all I need to hear." The line clicked softly as he hung up. I set the phone down, put the grinder back in place, and turned toward the kitchen sink. The sun had shifted, cutting a sharp line across the floor. Carrie was upstairs, oblivious, safe. That was what mattered. Charles Schwartz had built his authority on fear, intimidation, and leverage. That power collapsed in the span of a few sentences because I held what he valued most. The undeniable truth, the ability to act, and the restraint to let it exist as leverage. I walked to the window, looking out at the street. A neighbor jogged past, oblivious to the turmoil unfolding at the cellular level of one family. Law enforcement would adjust. Laurel would comply. The Schwartz empire would fray. All without a shot fired. All without a word from me in public. I exhaled slowly. Not relief. Not satisfaction. Just acknowledgement of reality. Control. Precision. Discipline. And that is exactly where this chapter ends. Chapter 10, what I taught them that year. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I stood in the kitchen, coffee in hand, watching the morning light stretch across the counters. Carrie was already awake, making himself toast, humming under his breath in a way I hadn't heard in months. That simple sound, the ease of it, was victory enough. Primary custody had been finalized 2 weeks ago. Laurel had signed the papers quietly, without fight. No lawyers. No negotiations. She disappeared from our lives, as if retreating were easier than facing the consequences. I didn't pursue her. She was irrelevant now. The Schwartz family? Their careers were in disarray. One by one, colleagues distanced themselves. Internal reviews leaked quietly to the press. Anonymous tips surfaced, and reputations collapsed without fanfare. No one connected it back to me. That wasn't necessary. Control had already been established. I poured coffee for both of us and sat at the table. Carrie slid into the chair across from me, butter knife in hand, smeared with jam. "You really did all that," he said quietly, eyes meeting mine for the first time without hesitation. "I did what had to be done," I said. He nodded, chewing thoughtfully. I understand now. About the students. About everything." I let him finish chewing before answering. Understanding is different from approval. But I don't need approval. You need to be safe. "I get it, Dad," he said, voice firm. "I know why you did it. And why you didn't tell anyone." I smiled faintly. Not pride. Not arrogance. Just recognition. The boy had grown overnight in ways I couldn't teach him in classrooms. Trauma teaches quickly. Discipline teaches slowly. We combined both. Later that week, I watched him walk through the gates of his middle school without scanning for danger, without looking over his shoulder, without the weight of expectation pressing him into submission. I exhaled. That was all the reassurance I needed. Years passed as they do. Carrie graduated high school, then enlisted in the Marines. He didn't speak about the weekend of his 12th Thanksgiving, didn't recount the events, didn't even hint at the scars that lingered beneath the surface. But he carried them with understanding, with resilience, with a discipline that mirrors mine. The day he stood in full uniform, shaking hands with his drill instructor, I realized the depth of what had been accomplished. Not in revenge, not in spectacle, in preparation. I had protected him. I had made him capable of trust and self-reliance in a world that would otherwise try to break him. One evening, years later, he came home from base on leave. We sat on the porch. The ocean wind carried a quiet peace over us. "You ever regret it?" he asked, surprising me. I considered the question carefully. No, not for what had to be done, but I don't take pride in it either. "You taught me what to do, even if I didn't know it then," he said. "I get it now. Thank you, Dad." His words carried weight. Not admiration, not gratitude for glory, acknowledgement of necessity. The kind that leaves scars invisible but permanent. I nodded. "You understand. That's enough." I spent hours reflecting on the 28 students who had executed my instructions. They were my most important lesson ever taught. Not because of the skill they displayed, not because of their efficiency, but because they embodied the principle that discipline, preparation, and moral clarity outweigh ego, impulse, or attachment. They were instruments of inevitability, and I had trusted them completely. I thought about the lesson I'd given that day, the question I had asked. Who wants extra credit? 28 hands had risen. 28 individuals had accepted responsibility for outcomes they would never discuss. 28 confirmations that when orders are precise, motives aligned, and rules clear, extraordinary outcomes are possible without chaos, spectacle, or recognition. Years later, the memory of that classroom still reverberates. I remember each face in the stillness before the answer. I remember the weight of the responsibility I placed on them and the silent acknowledgement that they understood. Justice is not always legal. Justice is not always public. Justice is not always clean. Sometimes it is meticulous. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it is unseen. I had learned that. I had applied it. I had lived it. And I had survived it with nothing more than a quiet conscience and an understanding of consequence. Carrie had learned it too. And that mattered more than headlines, accolades, or revenge. I cleaned the kitchen after dinner that night, folded a towel over my shoulder, and stacked the dishes carefully. The ritual was simple, repetitive, necessary. It reminded me that life continues after action, after resolution, after events that could have broken everything. I didn't record it. I didn't photograph it. I didn't announce it. Control doesn't need witnesses. Closure doesn't need applause. I walked to the porch, where the wind shifted again, carrying the scent of salt water across the deck. Carrie's laughter echoed from the yard as he kicked a soccer ball into the net he'd improvised from 2 chairs. He looked back at me once, smiled, and returned to his game. I allowed myself a long exhale. Not relief, not pride, acceptance. The 28 students, the 11 targets, the sequence of precise, calculated events, all of it had passed into history quietly. No one outside our walls would ever know the scope, the scale, or the discipline required. And that was correct. What I had taught them that year wasn't combat, wasn't tactics, wasn't even revenge. It was inevitability, precision, discipline, responsibility, and most importantly, that justice, when required, does not wait for permission, and it leaves no trace unless you allow it to. I watched Carrie again, his shoulders relaxed, his body unguarded, his expression peaceful. That was the lesson fully realized. I turned back inside, let the door close softly behind me, and let the silence settle. Not triumph, not arrogance, just stillness, control, and the certainty that the world, sometimes, could be kept right without witnesses, without noise, without loose ends. And that is exactly where this chapter and the story ends.